welcome to Exploring Imperator Rome. My name is Corine TimesnewRoman and in this series we're playing some of the game as well as looking at the representation of different cultures. And what are we gonna do today? Well, I want to introduce it not with my own words, but with the words of a very famous writer. Upon the throne is Dido, exiled there from Tyre, to flee a natural enmity with her own brother. It was an ancient wrong. Perhaps Dido already rings the bell here. But a few lines later, then came they to these lands where now the eyes behold the walls and yonder citadel of newly rising Carthage. These are the words of Virgil. He wrote the Aeneid, and in this book he's basically making a backstory for the Romans, but he also makes sure to include why Carthage and Rome were enemies. And in this book that's because Aeneid wronged Dido. It is very much up to debate whether Dido was actually a real person, but it still shows that he felt the need to explain why they were enemies. While Carthage was in the ancient world hugely wealthy, they had a very big maritime empire and were very influential. They were very good traders and they probably came from somewhere in Phoenicia. We all know that in the end the Romans conquered the Carthaginians, but that was only after 3 Punic Wars. It was never a clear-cut case that the Romans would win, and especially in the time that the game starts, it was very much up to debate whether Rome would ever become big at all. So let's find out how this translates into the game. First things first, I always like to check out the given heritage here. Carthaginian heritage is founded as the new city centuries ago by the settlers from Tyre in faraway Phoenicia. Carthage is now the uncontested leader of the Punic or Western Phoenician world. Her heritage is one of a strong naval and mercantile power, often led to greatness by charismatic generals. So here we are introduced as trading, as Phoenicians, as being very powerful, but they will make more clear what they mean when we start the game. An ancient and proud civilization, Carthage held a firm grip on the southern coast of the Mediterranean. Numerous colonial dependencies lie enthralled to the maritime giant, dotted on the coast of Iberia and on islands throughout the western part of the sea. The seafaring heritage of the Carthaginians remains unparalleled, extending territorial and economic dominance far and wide. However, the island of Sicily has remained a constant thorn in the side of the Carthaginian hegemony for many decades. Agathocles, the self-styled tyrant of Syracuse, still reigns in the eastern part of the island, having secured a tentative peace with Carthage and prolonging Greek presence there for the time being. Further north, the young and uncivilized Italic states wage bitter war on one another, though there are rumors that a once insignificant state is emerging to challenge the balance of powers in Italy. Carthage shall endure. Well, there are a few things to unpack here. And first of all, I would like to point out the use of proud civilization. Even though this is not necessarily false, this also adds nothing. In our look at the Iceni, they were also called proud, and Etruria as well. Were they more proud than other cities or empires? Who knows? Secondly, the wars on Sicily with Syracuse. Historically, Carthage fought a lot of wars with them. Agathocles was indeed a real historical figure and is still alive in this point in time. And he was very much a thorn in the eye of Carthaginian generals. Thirdly, we have the foreshadowing of rumors about the once insignificant state, which of course means Rome. Even though they really aren't that big or frightening right now, here we are truly looking back with the knowledge of today about Carthaginian fate onto history. The problem here is that the player could get the idea that the fate of Rome was a kind of inevitable trajectory, or that Carthage might have made some silly mistakes by disregarding Rome. To the other side, it would be nearly impossible for a player to play as Carthage and simply forget about historical Rome. This creates a difficult balance. I understand why the game does not want to disregard Rome, but you might also not want to put too much emphasis on it. And fourthly, I really like how we have to click on Carthage shall endure. I believe this is a reference to Cato Major, and he would end his speeches in the Roman Senate with a short Carthago delenda est, or Carthage shall be destroyed. Well, here we have the Carthaginian version. Carthage shall endure. Once again, this points to Carthage in relation to Rome, what of course is still yet to come. Now we're finally ready to start the game, and let's be a bit quick about it since we don't have a lot of time and we have a lot to get through. First we have the nation overview. We're an aristocratic republic, we have a Punic culture, we're a member of the Levantine group, exactly what we would expect through our Phoenician roots. We have a multitude of cultures and religions. Decisions look similar to what we've seen, except for this one: embrace megalithic traditions. Though the people of megalithic faith were once inspired by their neighbors, they now in turn have affected us. So points here for acknowledging cross-cultural influence. Now, let's delve a little bit deeper into the government of Carthage. We have a Zaphet and co-Zaphet, something we could expect when thinking back of Byblos. They were elected by citizens and held office with no military power for a 1-year term. Livy tells us they were functioning in roughly the same manner as consuls and co-consuls. He calls them the highest magistrates among the Phoenicians, and that the Senate was accordingly convened by the Zaphets, with authority correspondent to that of consuls. We see of course here that there is no Senate, but a body of advisors called the Adirim, the mighty ones, which was likely composed of the wealthiest members of society, namely merchants. But from here onward, things get somewhat strange. Most of the office names hopefully still sound familiar, since we've seen them all in Byblos. On closer inspection, however, while the titles are the same, they suddenly have a different function, which does not really make sense. We had the shepherd in Byblos, responsible for administering the collection of taxes and government spending to the monarch, but the shepherd in Carthage is a chief magistrate, responsible for the state census, public morality, and clearing blockages in the Senate and courts. It seems a bit strange to not only have the Hebrew names for offices here, but for different things than Phoenicia as well. The titles they used in Byblos are most often not very specific, so they do fit in a slightly different role as well. But why switch them up in the first place? I'm afraid I cannot answer that. And another example, Kahen in Byblos is the monarch's high priest and directs religious sacrifices, festivals, and interpretation of God's will. In Carthage, this is also a religious role, but just a bit different. And they switched the Kahen one from Byblos for the Augur, which is a very Roman term. It was an interpreter of the God's will. Granted, Livy names them already for the Kingdom of Rome, so it could be a quite old term that could be deriving from somewhere else. However, he was hardly an eyewitness and used the term without really knowing whether this was accurate. It is just a bit strange to me to find such a Roman term among Phoenician and Hebrew ones, while the Carthaginians are supposed to be the great adversaries. In the military tab, we can see we have North African military traditions. It tells us that North African traditions concentrate on the strengths of the Phoenician merchant state of Carthage and the surrounding nations. The Carthaginians had a strong naval tradition built on centuries of Mediterranean trade and made use of heavy infantry and African war elephants supported by light infantry and cavalry to smash through enemy formations. These traditions unapologetically focus on Carthage. At least they acknowledge this. And Carthage was of course hugely important and very influential, so the emphasis does make sense. But we also have a few traditions that mention the Berber traditions, like Born in the Saddle. Another interesting one is the Iberian Draft. It tells us that Carthage, in an attempt to counter the lack of available troops associated with their sprawling, decentralized empire, employed vast quantities of foreign soldiers. And indeed, in 236 before Common Era, Hamilcar Barca led an expedition to Iberia where he hoped to gain a new empire for Carthage to compensate for the territories that had been lost in recent conflicts with Rome, and to serve as a base for vengeance against the Romans. So this is also something that we will see Carthage do in a game usually, taking over Iberian territory. Then we have the Sacred Band, and this was a name used by ancient Greek historians to refer to an elite infantry unit of Carthaginian citizens that served in the military campaigns during the 4th century before Common Era. It is unknown how they identified themselves or whether they were considered a distinct formation. And then of course we also have an emphasis on Hannibal and elephants. The point here is, these traditions are really tailored to the Carthaginians, with traditions from various points in time, some in dealing with Romans, but with a good mix of other influences as well. Maybe the barbarian military traditions wants to take a few notes here. Now let's have a look at the important families. As was the case for Byblos, I still haven't learned how to pronounce Phoenician in that time, so I'm sorry for any mispronunciations. From about 550 to 450, the Magonid family monopolized the top military position, and later the Barcid family acted similarly. Well, this explains the Barked family. Giscoid, or Gisco, is the Latinization of the Punic masculine given name Gersacon, a Carthaginian general who fought against Rome in Iberia. Bodo was a Carthaginian senator and naval officer who served during the First Punic War, and the Hennets were a dynasty, possibly a monarchy, before the oligarchic republic came to rise. All these important families are known for one or more key positions, and they have actual historical names. And here we have the missions. They focus on either more stability, war with Syracuse, or strengthening your grip on Africa. This would make sense, since this is what they were actually doing. With what is strange is that they put a lot of emphasis on the relationship with Rome, as was evident from the beginning message of the game and some of the military traditions, for example. Constantly hinting at what will happen and not make it a mission. And remember, we were being warned already in the beginning. Further north, the young and uncivilized Italic states wage bitter war on one another. Though there are rumors that the once insignificant state is emerging to challenge the balance of power in Italy. So I want to end this part 1 on a bit a different note than I usually would. Just imagine, you are a Carthaginian ruler who does take these supposed rumors seriously, and your augur tells you to watch out for this new state. I will start another game and make it my own mission to defeat Rome as the first thing I'll do, before it ever gets a chance to grow. At this moment in time, the Carthaginians were just a lot more powerful. In history, Carthage was defeated only in 146 before Common Era. And as we can see, it is actually not that hard to take over Rome as Carthage. It might even make the rest of your game a lot easier if you start with that move. It only takes a couple of years. Well, that was it for today. Tune in next time for part 2. We will take a look at the religion of Carthage, discover the ancient Night's Watch, and analyze just what will happen when we let observer mode play. Thank you very much for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you next time in Exploring Imperator Rome.